Nigeria's media world was thrown into mourning with the announcement of the death of a renowned Pan-African writer and influential columnist, Peter Enahoro, popularly known by his pet name, Peter Pan. He died on Monday in London at the age of 88. Our correspondent Gbenga Ashiru chronicles his life and times.
At a point when bloodshed was non-negotiably the price for freedom, perhaps one of the last breed of Nigerian journalists who found the pen as a battle axe to fight for Nigeria's independence was Peter Enahoro. Popularly known by his pet name, Peter Pan, Peter Enahoro was born in January 21, 1935, to the Enahoro family in Uromi in Edo State. Peter had a stint with government school Warri before graduating from Government College Ughelli in 1948. Peter Enahoro began his career in the media as an assistant publicity officer in 1954 in a department now known as the Federal Ministry of Information. Enahoro joined the Daily Times as a sub-editor in 1955 at the age of 20, making him one of the youngest editors in Nigeria's media history. He subsequently rose to the zenith of the organization as the editor-in-chief of the Daily Times. In the 1960s, Enahoro went into self-imposed exile that turned out a 13-year spell out of his home country. While in exile, Enahoro joined the Radio Deutsche Welle in Cologne, Germany. He also served in many other international media outfits. Enahoro launched a Pan-African magazine called Africa Now. He was later appointed the sole administrator of Daily Times Nigeria PLC in 1996. The Macmillan Press once described Enahoro as arguably Africa's best journalist writing in the English language. He is also known to have authored a couple of books. Most prominent among them is How to Become a Nigerian. Enahoro Peter Pan will be remembered as a rare patriot and journalist par excellence. Gbenga Ashiru, Arise News.
All right, thank
For
you
more
very much.
on Peter Enahoro's legacy, we're joined by journalist and lawyer OSA Director. He's the former editor-in-chief, CEO, Insider Weekly magazine. Good to see you, OSA Director, and thanks for your time. Now, we're talking about one man, one family of journalists, from Anthony the eldest, and to him now, and also Mike Enahoro. Tell us what this will mean to the Nigerian media with this big loss.
Well, talking about Peter Pan, or Peter Enahoro, popularly known as Peter Pan, his death is a great loss to the media industry, and indeed Nigeria and Africa as a whole. And as you rightly mentioned, he came from a line of prominent journalists. First is Chief Anthony Enahoro, even though in his later days and years, he was more known as a politician and one of the nationalist fighters, you know, those who fought for Nigeria's independence and actually the mover of vote for independence. And then you also have his younger brother, Mike Enahoro, with his velvet voice, who was a quintessential broadcaster. I want to proudly say that Peter Pan, as he was famously known, is one of the greatest progenitors of journalism that on whose shoulders some of us stood on to expand the frontiers of media freedom, civil liberties, and respect for the dignity of man. He was a man who spoke truth to power. For me, he was a revolutionary of his time and a classic satirist who devour and deploy the pen, as your Ashiru said, as a battle axe to fight injustices and to emphasize on openness and transparency and accountability by those who govern us. For me, he was one of those, or indeed the person who started what we later came to know as guerrilla journalism in my time, you know. So for me, it is a very, very deep loss. It's a personal loss because I'm also from Edo State, you know. I'm not trying to claim him, but he was one of those who inspired me to practice journalism, even though I initially read biochemistry in university. But following the professional trajectory of people like Peter Pan and Professor Tony Iradia, I told myself that I'm going to be a journalist because he was a man who was bold, incisive, very courageous, and he was very, very fearless. and admirable in the way he conducted himself. And apart from his professional commitment, I want to also say that Peter Pan was a classic and pragmatic experimentation in that human philosophy of work hard and enjoy hard. He was a man who worked hard and lived life to the fullest. He really enjoyed hard if you were close to Peter Pan. For him, life shouldn't be taken too seriously.
OSA Director, look, President Muhammadu Buhari has described him as a man who earned public trust through fearless writing. Of course, having died at the age of 88, would you say that Peter Enahoro, Peter Pan, died a happy man, considering the foundation that you say he laid for journalism in Nigeria, fearlessness, boldness, and all of that, against the backdrop of what's going on right now in the media space? And I'd also like you to touch on the book, How to Become a Nigerian. What do you even know about that book?
Well, like I said, Peter Pan worked hard and enjoyed hard. So I think he really died a happy man, because if we were close to him, he had a very great sense of humor. You know, he was an easygoing person, but at the same time, he was very, very principled. So he doesn't need anyone's validation, or he doesn't need any government validation for his greatness, his boldness, and his legacies. For those of us who are journalists, we know how great Peter Pan was. We know the legacies he left behind. And they're talking about his book, How to Be a Nigerian. I would say that most people will hardly remember the writings of Peter Pan as a political commentator. His entire life is now condensed into the book, How to Be a Nigerian. And it's just like a musician releasing a hit album. You find out that most people hardly remember the other songs that he sang. They will always emphasize on that hit. So the hit of Peter Pan was that book, How to Be a Nigerian, which was a description, a satirical representation of the Nigerian men, the Nigerian demeanor, the Nigerian antics, the Nigerian misbehavior, the Nigerian somersault and funny side of life. I mean, typically, like a Nigerian, you invite him to an occasion that will start by 2 p.m. He will arrive at 6 p.m. and he will discover that he's actually the first person to come to that occasion. So those were the kind of things that Peter Pan described in his book, How to Be a Nigerian. He used a sense of humor to explain all that we needed to checkmate in our life. And he also emphasized the good things, the loveliness, the camaraderie of the
Director,
Nigerian.
let me comment now. Before you go, you were close to him, and you're one of the very few lucky ones. Tell us one instance that has remained indelible in your mind in your interaction with the late Peter Pan.
Yeah, for me, I was cited, even though, like I said, you really don't need people's validation, that he was impressed with my performance as a journalist. And then I found it very strange, or very exciting to notice that this was a man with an immense sense of humility. You know, he was ready to get down to brass tacks, to play with any person of any age and of any intellectual capacity. Don't forget that the highest academic qualification of Peter Pan was a school certificate from Government College, Ueli, and it was described by Frank Beckton in his book, The Press of Africa, as perhaps and arguably the greatest African that who writes better or best in English language. And he has mostly been described by a lot of authors as the best known African journalist. And for such a man, when you come to him and he comes to your level to relate with you, and he's always abreast with events, what we say in a local parlance, the man no waiting day at any time. So
There's
that
no
I found
better
very,
place to
very
leave it.
interesting in interact with him.
There's no better place to leave it. Also, director, the man know it in day. Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight tonight.